So, what is brand? Whenever you talk about entrepreneurship, I know you had started reading chapter 1 up to chapter 10, your first quarter exam included, about the businesses, whether it's foreign or local businesses. What do they have in common? That is what we call brand. What is a brand? Ano ba yung brand? Brand is not supposed to be considered ranking. It's not supposed to be the rank of a specific product. It is about the approach and not about being excellent. Remember that. When you talk about brand, it should be about, well, recall. A brand is not a culture and a mindset of an organization. Sorry, a brand is about culture. And it is about identities, aspiration, and differentiation. Now, sample. When a brand is very known, yung mga talagang kilala na, they become a representation of that specific product. What do I mean by that? Sample. Merong isang bibili ng toothpaste. This has been one of my favorite sample because Filipinos love to use this. Pabili nga po ng Colgate. That's the best example. Yun pong close up. What is wrong with that statement? Close up and Colgate are both brands. But since Colgate is more known kesa sa close up, it became as a representation of that product. I hope you got that. Another thing, which I hate the most when students speak, pupunta sa isang copying machine, and then, let us say, magpapa-photocopy. Anong sinasabi? What do you usually say? Pa-Xerox nga po. Why Xerox? When the correct term should be what? Photocopy. Right? But since Xerox is the most common brand for photocopying machine, it became as a representation. So it represents success. Remember that, guys. Whenever that brand became a representation of a product, it connotes success. According to the American Marketing Association, brand is a name, term, sign, or symbol, the sign whatsoever, combination, that intended to identify the goods and service of one seller or a group and differentiate them from the competitors. Right? So they represent distinguished, kakaiba. This, the ones you see on your screen, are what we call some of the major brands. Sample. All right? So, what are the most common major brands we have here in our country? Number one, I'm hoping lahat ito alam nyo. When you talk about brand, there is what we call Coca-Cola. Okay? Wherever you go, the world knows about it. Walt Disney Pictures, the Dell computers. Does anybody know what brand does this black horse represent? Anyone? Ferrari, very good. It represents an Italian classic cars. Expensive. And isa sa mga local brands natin is Meralco, the KFC, and the Apple itself. What do you notice about those logos? Just one look on those logos, you already have an idea what product they represent. That is what brand is all about. Okay? Brand name is the given name by the maker of a product, range of a products, especially what we call trademark. So when you patent, indicate a trademark for that specific brand name, nobody can use that name except you. That's why we have Securities and Exchange Commission, okay, here in our country. A brand name is an identity which puts a product apart from the rest. It identifies you. You will see a lot of logo in our discussion today. Brand name summarize all of the brands it stands for. Brand name creates an association of the minds and creates, what is this? Curiosity to your customers. The first public act of branding is the brand name, which has a unique role to play. Ultimately, brand name is the only element of the brand that will endure throughout the life cycle. What does that mean? A specific company will have what we call a brand name, but the logo will continuously what? Be developed. If you notice on the logo of the Apple before, let me just go back to the slide earlier, this one. The Apple logo now is different from the logo before. You can search it yourselves. Even the logo of KFC now, it is still Kentucky Fried Chicken, but the way it was presented before was very different. Same as with all the brands that you can see on your screen now. That is what differentiates a brand name from the logo. In Tagalog, logo magi-improve, but the brand name will stick. These are some of the local brands that through the years of their operation had improved. What are those? For example, the Jollibee. When I was still a kid, Jollibee was not presented that way. Napakasimple. San Miguel was the same. Okay? I know majority of the brands that you see on your screen now are, well, familiar. Okay? You have Bench, you have Pampers, Ariel, Tide, and so on. These are the local brands that you see. I mean, brands that you see whenever you go out of your houses. When you go to the stores and so on, groceries and all. Right? You notice that within a year, there's a lot of changes, especially with Jollibee. Even for their specific menus, there are changes. Now, there are different characteristics of a good brand name. What are those? And you have to remember this when you do create your own brands, when you became entrepreneurs. What are those? Number one, they should be distinctive. Kakaiba in Tagalog. They should really be something still that would represent your product. Second, it has to be simple. Madali lang bigkasin, madaling intindihin. That's what it meant. Third, it has to be meaningful. It has to represent the product itself. When you talk about Sony, it talks about gadgets, electronics, and so on. Meaningful. Fourth, the word should be universally valid. What does that mean? Meaning, the words that you would be using or the word that you would be using should not be taboo or bawal sa ibang bansa. It must have a positive meaning on all different languages. That's what it meant. And it has to be short, maiksi lang. That's why it's related to simple. The last but not the least is it should be compatible with the product. This should be the characteristics of a good brand name. But then again, some have, well, their unique style. And you will learn about them later. Brand name association. What does that mean? When you talk about brand names, there are different association with regards to the character, product, or the image that it or you guys try to represent. For example, when you talk about word association, when several words come into mind uttering that specific brand, yours must be distinguished. For example, Mercedes. Mercedes is a name for a lady. But now, when you talk about Mercedes, it represents an exclusive brand of a car. Sophisticated, mamahalin. That's a Mercedes-Benz. An Audi is the same. Nike is the same. That is a word association. When you talk about image association, it includes image stimulated by the name. What does that mean? When you talk about Mang Inasal, what comes to your mind? That's an image association. Immediately, you can imagine what product does this brand represent. When you say Mang Inasal, you talk about grilled chicken, local grilled chicken. When you talk about KFC, you talk about Kentucky Fried Chicken, fried chickens. That's image association. When you talk about what else? A brand of a burger that Big Brothers Burger. I forgot the name of that burger. Wherein the burger itself is in the name of that brand. Brothers Burger, I think. Sorry, I forgot the brand. And the last one is the product association. It includes any product or product category associated with a name. For example, aspirin, medical. Those have different brands after their brand, pero yun pa rin yung major brand. What does that mean? Meron siya yung mga generic name, pero meron siya nung branded name, but representing just the same product. Okay? That is what product association means. Right? Nowadays, when you talk about Adidas, majority of the people who will hear that, speak about that, will think you're talking about shoes. But Adidas nowadays is not just about shoes. May garments na rin. Pure gold is the same. Okay? Now, there are different types of brand names. What are those? First one is what we call the descriptive brand name. When you hear the brand name, it already describes what product they are representing. Okay? For example, Manila Water. When you say Manila Water, they talk about what? Water distribution in Manila. General Electric, GE. They talk about appliances which is related or supplied, powered by electricity. Meralco is another brand. Those are what we call descriptive brand name. When you talk about suggestive brand name, It suggests the characteristics of the brand. A good example is Twitter. What do you do in Twitter? Nowadays, people tweet. That's why it's Twitter. Snapshot, Instagram, Instant, and so on. Those are suggestive brand names. And the last on the list is what creates curiosity. Curiosity in a positive way, that people are enticed to try out that specific brand. For example, these brands have no whatsoever connection to their product. Number one, Starbucks. Even if you look at the logo, there's no relation about coffee. But whenever you guys feel that you need to drink coffee, what is the primary brand that comes to your name? Starbucks, right? Aside from Nescafe and so on, of course. There's also Kodak. If you even search the Wikipedia or the dictionaries, there is no word that connects Kodak to camera. It is just what the owner named that specific product. Okay? Those are the types of brand name. Now, there is a process that organizations, people undergo whenever they choose a brand name for their products. Gone are the days when the brand names were decided immediately. In Tagalog, pwede na yan or bahala na. Hindi na siya pwede or applicable nowadays. Why? People studied them. What is the most common yet enticing name for our product? Today, there are well-defined process to do it, and it is done scientifically. Survey is one step. Who says a brand name should be just a noun? And in today's competitive world, it has to be transformed into an action word. A word that demands action from consumers instantly. Those are the classifications of the brand name today. Now, these are the types of brand name that was used before. Double Trouble, something like it talks about the product and, well, the product itself. They invented the name out of context, meaning out of nowhere. They just thought of that name. A good example is the Apple company. Imagine, what's the relation of the Apple to a company that is related to technology? Experience is another, and what they offer as a service. That is what we call the service. PAL, Philippine Airlines. You can know, immediately you will have an idea what product they are representing. It's about air travel. And the founder itself, just like Ford. At least now you know that when you talk about Ford, those of you who own that Ford brand, it came from the surname of the founder. Okay? Now, there is a process that we do in branding. What is that? We do a marketing objective. We study who will benefit the product. The brand audit. We scrutinize the name we had applied or we think of best for the product. Brand strategies, I mean. And then brand name alternative. People will try to still rearrange the brand name until it is now finalized. The name of the company should be um, Enterprise, something like that. Brand Enterprise. Remember, guys, that people, especially Filipinos, remembers brand strictly. People may change their brands, but it still represents the product. What do I mean by that? There are times that companies change the name of their brands, but the Filipinos would still assume, since it's the same product from the same, it's almost the same product as the that came from the same company, it has the same result. Pareho lang yan. Galing lang din yan dun sa dating ganitong pangalang kumpanya. That is what we call recall. So, you must remember to do good whenever you are asked to represent a brand. Even characters of people are remembered when they are representing a brand, a company, or an organization. Now, there are criteria for choosing a brand name. Just like what I've mentioned earlier, some of these have already been discussed. Help position the brand in the mind of the consumer, the recall. Not to be generic, but not also limiting. Something like, when you brand your name, should you choose the brand shirt if you're going to sell t-shirt? Imagine that. It has to be short as possible. It has no negative connotations, as I mentioned earlier. Easy to pronounce and be available. When I say easy to pronounce, there are some brands that it takes time for people to recognize and to pronounce properly. Good example is Jirbu. Students, some of my colleagues even, would say it's Jirbod. It's wrong. It should be pronounced as Jirbu. Those are, well, marketing tactics that would help, well, talk about that specific brand. Now, these are the common mistakes whenever people or organization think of the brands. First of their mistake is that they treat naming as an afterthought. In Filipino, pwede na yan. It's wrong. Because for as long as that product exists, that brand tags with it, stays with it. If we're getting the name, as strategic as it is, must be creative. It must be able to remind people that this brand exists. Underestimating the importance of a good creative brief, confusing the need for information with the need for differentiation, and they overlook complex trademark issues. When you talk about trademark issues, some people tries to imitate the names. Those are what we call trademark issues. And the last one is that they ignore global implications. Some of them use the names that were used or owned abroad. That's illegal. Do you have any questions?